Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ontario Retirement Income Channel, where we help you plan for a secure and happy retirement. Today we are going to discuss about a 60-year-old couple living in Ontario with $2 million in their retirement portfolio. Question they had for me is if they can retire, and if so, how much they might be able to spend. Last couple of years, they did a lot of right things, which is they saved what they could and invested it. They never thought about when they might be able to retire or how much they might be able to spend. In today's video, we are going to jump into their financial situation. Let's call them Martin and Hannah. So we'll look into their financial situation and uncover all the different planning techniques required to get to the retirement planning goals and show them what is needed. We're going to take a look at what is needed to get them from where they are today to where they want to be in the future, while also showing them the different possibilities that exist along the way. So let's jump right in. Before we start off, we got to make some assumptions. So we are looking at a couple, Martin and Hannah, who are 60 years old. Martin has a portfolio of $300,000 in individual RSPs, $300,000 in employer RSPs, which is a defined contribution plan in specific he has, which means he puts in a contribution and then employer matches it. He also has $125,000 in the individual TFSA. Hannah, on the other hand, she has $100,000 in spousal RSPs, $200,000 in individual RSPs, $100,000 in employer RSPs, and $125,000 in her TFSA. They also have a joint non-registered account, currently fair market value of $750,000, and the adjusted cost based on that is $300,000. And right now they live in a mortgage-free home, and the primary residence, the valuation of it is about $1.4 million. Just so you know, they also have two lovely grandkids. In terms of where do grandkids come to play in the picture, we're going to discuss it in the future sections. Some further assumptions. So inflation, we're going to take it as 2.1. The rate of return is 5%. The life expectancy for both of them, we're looking at the age 95. The current income they have is Martin is at 250,000 a year, and Hannah is going to be for 150,000 a year. Now they're asking themselves, when can we retire, and how much can we actually spend comfortably, so that regardless of what happens in the market, regardless of what happens with inflation, they can actually feel secure and they don't have to go back to work or potentially run out of money. That's really is the biggest question. So at Ontario Retirement Income Planner, whenever we go through a financial planning process with a client, we always start with an understanding of what they want their retirement to look like. Now, everyone's situation is different, and the way that we optimize your investments, the taxes, the insurance, everything from a financial perspective, it first starts with what is their priorities and what are their personal goals. So we went the same thing through with Martin and Hannah. We just asked them some questions. When do you want to retire? Both of them thought they were doing pretty well with their investments, but to them, they just always thought they're gonna work till 65. They didn't really know what they would do for medical insurance before. Then they just thought that was the age you're supposed to work to. So we said probably 65, and let's explore if there's other options for them. The next question, of course, is how much do they actually want to spend in retirement? It's a simple question, right? But it's a very difficult question for a lot of people. Martin and Hannah, they were pretty detailed, so want to they went through the itemized spreadsheet which they have, and finally we figured out for all the basic lifestyle expenses, which is the property taxes, the car insurance, utilities, groceries, phone bills, and so on. They're expected to have about $6,000 a month, which is 72,000 a year. That's for the basic retirement lifestyle expenses. Now, the next thing we want to plan for is health insurance. Now, in Ontario, we do have the OHIP, and it covers quite a bit, right? But there are additional prescription drugs or medical equipments in which they might need in the future, which OHIP doesn't cover, right? So, given that both of them they were already on some medication, so we are going to set aside another $5,000 a year for that. Now, during the budgeting, we also wanted to budget for new cars, because every so often might have to buy a new car. So sometimes when people give me an average monthly amount that they want to spend in retirement, they already kind of include that amount they're saving, or they may add extra amount. So in this situation, they want to have money set aside because they want to buy the cash in car, buy the car in cash. So they expected to have about $6,000 a year. They want to save up, and every 10 years they go on to change their cars. Next is vacation, right? Vacation is always a big one. So the reason I like to separate this travel expense out from the, let's say, the general retirement expense is most people are not going to travel the same way at age 65 as they are at age 85. So generally, it's for the first number of years what they want to do. So for them, we have planned that for vacation for the next 10 years, they would like to have another 2,500 a month, which is about $30,000 a year. Next thing we also look at family. I mean, if their own expenses and all is being figured out, what about family? So family is really important to them and they love their children and their grandchildren like crazy. And one thing they shared with me is they just had some concerns or some doubts that the children were going to able to put some money away for the grandchildren, right? I mean, when you talk about Toronto, it's a very expensive city to live in. So sure, the children might be able to cope up with their own expenses, but there might be a hesitancy in terms of can they actually provide for educational funding for the grandkids. So Hannah mentioned one thing that she would love to be able to help the grandchildren so that the children won't feel the pressure of trying to pay for the mortgage, pay for the cost of living, and pay for the education for the grandkids. So we don't know what the children has set up for the grandchildren. Therefore, for now, we are going to start with $0, and we are then going to see what they could actually contribute if it was 5,000 a year or 10,000 a year, right? So Martin and Hannah, they want to see what we can do with all their goals first, so we don't end up doing all this and funding the children's education plans just to one day to become a burden towards the children and the grandchildren because they have run out of money and now they have to rely upon them. So these were some of the goals that were highlighted and identified when we had a personal conversation with them. Now, when we look into some other uh, stuff that they have, so they do have government pensions, right? They have the expected CPP at 865. For Martin was 900 a month. For Hannah is 850 a month. OAS, the old age security based on residency, at 865. They expect Martin to have 600 a month, Hannah 600 a month. And they have employer pensions, which they're both contributing 3% each, and the employer also goes on to contribute 3%. So, starting today through retirement, we know what their assets are, we know what the assumed growth rate is, we know their goals, we know when they want to retire, how much they want to spend, how much they want to spend above and beyond just the basic living expenses. Now we know what their CPP is, we know how much their savings, all right, and when they plan to retire. What we want to know is when we put that all together to say, based upon all this information, is this realistic for them to retire at 65? Or do they have to postpone the retirement? Or can they afford to actually retire before? Right? So the main question comes down to is what if retire now or retire sooner? That's really the question they have. So first we look at the current situation, right? If you look at in terms of their income. So their earned income is about 400,000 a year combined. In terms of surpluses, if you see for the next 5 years, they actually have a pretty decent amount of surplus. So what we want to do is we want to move things around. So what we have done is the TFSAs were not maxed out. So we are going to redirect these surpluses into a TFSA, try to max those out first. And whatever is the remaining amount, we are going to move them to the non-registered account. So now at this point of time, after we have reallocated those funds, we have reallocated into the registered accounts, right? The registered contributions, and we have moved some money into the non-registered investments. Okay. Uh, Next, we look at in terms of cash flows, right? So how are they going to do in terms of retirement? So when you look at the 865, we notice they have the CPP and the OAS, okay? And then we have the joint non-registered account where they're going to be getting the funding from. Into the cash outflows, you have 112. So we factored in the basic expenses, the lifestyle expenses, the medical expenses, the car, and then we talked about the vacation, which they want to set money aside. So overall, if you notice, I mean, from 65 to 72, they are doing pretty well. Okay. Now, if you want to take a look at, you know what, from which parts of money is where the money is going to be coming from. So if you try to zoom in, uh, so this is a non-registered account. These are non-registered. Then you look at the TFSAs, which is a light green, and then we are looking at the registered and then the locked in, right? So we have seen a pretty consistent flow of funds um, over time. Let's go further. In terms of probability, so can they, given what we have, can they actually retire? Right. So we run a Monte Carlo simulation to take a look at, hey, you know what is the probability to retire? So we run 500 trials because keep in mind the assets that they have, they will fluctuate over time, right? So we have to factor in those fluctuations. Is it going to be good or bad? So in the 479 trials, 90% or more, the goal was covered, right? So more than 91%, there was a high success rate. There was a 10 percentile that, in terms of the amount they will have, would be about $8 million, right? But overall, in terms of success rate, it looks pretty good. And if from the 90th percentile, you're looking at the value, they have about $22 million. So that's a pretty good best case scenario situation. Now, what do they want to retire now? Right? So this is retiring at age 65. This is retiring now. Can they afford to retire now? Right? So before the success rate is at 90% plus, but if they were to retire today, right, the success rate has dropped down to 49.6%. So that's a almost 50% drop, right? So if they have any expectations to retire today with the current living expenses, the vacation expenses, and so on, which they mentioned, uh, the success rate of that to happen is actually pretty low, right? 50% is kind of a coin toss. So realistically, taking a look at, they were not in a position to retire today. Now, when you take a look at the cash outflows, okay, so we look at what if they do retire at age 65, okay, so these were the expenses. And keep in mind, they mentioned they want to provide for the two grandkids as well. So if they want to retire at age 65 and they want to actually go and contribute $30,000 for the two grandkids, so about $50,000 for the next 5 years, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, how would that look like? Right? So they work till 65, and for the next 6 years or so, they actually contribute $30,000 for the grandkids. Now, is that going to affect their retirement? Let's see. So this is the scenario where they're age 65, and this is a scenario where they are retiring at age 65, plus they are going to put money aside for the grandkids, right? So if you notice now, the success rate with grandkids is about 90% odd. So that's actually a pretty good number, right? The current situation versus the retiring in the future with the grandkids, funding those grandkids, the number is actually pretty high, so which is pretty good. And lastly, other than the retirement, we also look at the estate analysis. So what happens in the event of death? So if you notice, in the event they were to pass away at different stages, so let's say this is today, 8 years from now, 8 years from now, right? So 2059. Let's say if you notice across the board, the net estate value, okay, and in estate shrinkage is what is going to be in terms of dollar amount. So if both of them were to pass away today, or 8 years from now, or 16 years from now, what is going to happen to the estate? So if you notice, the estate value starts decreasing, right? So if they want to make sure that, you know what, whatever that they have saved up, which is whatever is the net worth which they have over here, and they want to make sure that this is the net worth they actually want to pass along to their kids or grandkids, then they probably will need to get some life insurance to cover for this gap. Okay. So if you find these tips helpful, which we have discussed for this Hannah and Martin situation, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more insights on any financial planning and retirement readiness. Uh, do comment below with any questions or topics you'd like to cover in the future videos. And thanks for watching. If you want to have a more personal advice to see what is going to be, how is your retirement going to look like, visit us at ontarioretirement.com or pull up your phone, scan the QR code on here, and it's going to take you directly to our book a meeting website. Happy to see you guys later. Have a good one.